We are about to get bully on public lands with a man who I consider to be at the forefront of the issue in America, one Mr. Hal Herring. It's been a while since he's been on the podcast with us, and we are honored and grateful to have the man back with us in these strange and interesting times. I'm Brandon Butler.
I'm Nathan Shags McLeod.
Tell him who you are, Hal.
Oh, hell, I'm okay. I'm Hal Herring. I have a long history with Brandon and Shags, so I'm proud to be back here. How do I identify myself? Well, I've been doing public land stuff for about 27, 28 years, 30 years, writing a lot about it for Field and Stream. I don't know. I'm glad to be here, talk about it.
Welcome to the Drifting Outdoors podcast. Yeah, I was just telling Savannah before we jumped on here, I was like, the last time I saw Hal, the cabin was still up and available. We had a weekend down there, and that was a good time. I jumped on your podcast. I believe you jumped on ours, and yeah, I'd left a house committee meeting when they were trying to screw the Department of Conservation out of all their funding, and boy,
One of my
weirder
favorite Hal Herring notes is the fact that this man has slept in the wild across the world, and he says the coldest he's ever been in his life was inside my cabin.
That's what I was about to say. I was like, I remember pulling in there, and you had cut that cedar. It was all everything was really beautiful, you know. And then I was like, wow, I wonder when we're gonna build a fire, like turn some heat on. And that part of the cabin wasn't done yet.
Yeah, your dog crawled into your sleeping bag. The dog was so cold.
Yeah, it was like, what was it? It was just above zero up there. And I don't know what it was in the house, probably about 50 below.
It somehow radiated cold into the cabin. So
yeah, somehow that cabin was always colder than it was outside and warmer than it was outside. It was always the extremes.
Yeah.
And we didn't have AC, so nature just kind of took care of us. So
right on. I was
another good old school Hal Herring story is when I asked him to be the keynote speaker at the Conservation Federation banquet. And to Hal's credit, he is one of the foremost conservation writers in the world. If you don't know who he is, you've been living under a rock. But I don't think you'd done a ton of public speaking at that point. And this is back in my getting lubricated with a little bourbon in the afternoon days before a speech, you know. So me and Hal are up in my room, and he's been writing a speech. And the way this man puts words together is a gift from God. So what he was writing was incredible. But he's like, well, how do you memorize all this? And I was like, man, you don't. Like, you just know what you're going to talk to. I was like, into my second bourbon or something. I said, tear that thing up. Throw it in the garbage. You know what you got to say. Just get up there and say it. And he's like, all right, I'll do it. And he gets on stage, and it's like a ghost. Like, you can hear a pin drop. And I'm thinking, oh shit, what did I do? You know, what did I do to him? And but then, man, like a train, like starting to roll. He just starts kind of picking up momentum. He's finding his voice. He's getting going. And by the end of that speech, he could have drove that train through any wall in the world. He basically does a mic drop, doesn't say goodbye, walks off the stage. The place erupts. Everyone comes to their feet. It was one of the best speeches I've ever seen because of the way he accidentally built momentum towards this just punishing end, and made me look like a huge success for having you there. And I'll never forget that moment of like, uh-oh, what did I do? I
was sweating bullets. I was sweating bullets, no doubt. Yeah.
I remember afterwards, I was ready to run through a wall for you. I was like, God dang, let's do this.
So unfortunately, we find ourselves back facing those same issues, you know, issues that unfortunately probably won't ever go away. And right now, the threat is real. There's There's an opportunity to start losing some land in Utah. And, once the first domino falls, I wouldn't want to be standing at the end of that stack. So, Hal, here's a question that I get, and I answer it to people, but I'm more interested in how you'd answer it. Look, I live in Missouri. I'm never going to Utah. If I got to fight about things, I'm not going to spend my ammunition fighting about 700,000 acres of desert that I'm never going to step foot on. Why should I care about public lands in Utah that I'll never see being sold?
Man, I can't even imagine that question, that even being asked by an American, right? This is the United States of America, man. What happens in Utah is what happens in Alabama. It's what happens in Missouri. Dude, we've been all in this together since 1776, since 1789. I can't even answer that question. Because I'll tell you one thing, brother. You may get down there one day in April and it's pouring rain and mixing snow like last time I was at your house. Not the cabin, but at your house. Remember, I got caught in that blizzard. And you may say to yourself, man, where in America am I going to go to completely reset my life and rejuvenate my spirit? And maybe I'll take my kids, maybe I'll take my wife, maybe I'll just leave and go. And I'm going to go to the deserts of Utah because I was 50 years old before I found the deserts in Utah. Only experience I'd had before that was working at the Black Mesa coal mine planting native plants on the sort of reclaimed ground, and I used to drive through Utah and go, man, I wished I could had time to go out there and look at that, right? And then, 25, 30 years later, I found I was able to go. And so I can't even answer that question. Someday I may want to go to the Mark Twain National Forest in Missouri and do the same thing. I may want to go to Daniel Boone in Kentucky, do the same thing, in Talladega in Alabama. Well, you let it go in Utah, buddy. It's going in Alabama. It's going in Missouri. They're setting a precedent here that we are not Americans together. That there is nothing that they will not try to take. That they have no shame. And I love today, buddy. I love what we are doing today in this country. We are finally asking the questions. The right questions of what is it that you believe in and what will you stand for?
I love it, man. Speaking of a couple Missourians out west, the Wyoming corner crossers that many of your audience members may recognize, they're Missourians.
You bet.
And I had the opportunity of meeting them actually out in Bozeman. We were on the Meat Eater podcast together, and I've stayed friends with them. And then Shags and I had them here on Driftwood as well. The irony in the whole story, like a guy like you, Hal, a guy like me, we would poke the bear. Like we would figure out like, okay, this corner crossing rule is kind of bogus. I think I can get away with it in court. Hey, BHA, if I do this, will you fund me? If you'll fund my legal defense, I'll take the shot, and then let's just go to war together. That seems like a hell of a strategy. That's not what it was at all. These are just some good old boys from southeast Missouri that were like, well, shit, let's just use a ladder. Yep. And they found themselves in this, like, cyclone. And how has that, you've been out there, you've been part of that. How has that kind of, to me, it seems like it's lit a fire under some people's asses. And that was being on offense. Like, we were going on offense. Yep. So is that part of the reason why we're seeing this attack? I mean, right now, like, because we finally started gaining some ground, they're like, we're going to smash you?
No. The attack, the Mike Lee bill there coming out of Utah is just replaying a battle between Utah and the federal government that started in 1858, over who's going to control the land. And that corner crossing thing, though, has no doubt brought the ultra elite wealthy folks who have now bought up so much of Montana and Wyoming, right? That's brought them into going like, wow, Wouldn't it be nice if they were to sell off all the public lands? Because I'm in a unique place where I could buy them. And we saw that with the Wilkes Brothers purchase in Montana of 330,000 acres at one fell swoop, 128,000 in Idaho, where the Idaho Fish and Game couldn't even honor the tags they'd sold to people because the paper company land was now in private hands. We're seeing these massive purchases of land, and so in the world we're seeing it. It's global. Like the American land could be seen as one of the last great cash cows for people who move paper that don't actually produce anything. They're not going to fix your truck. They're not going to roof your house. They're not going to build anything. They're not going to be Steve Jobs in a garage inventing something. They want to move paper and make money, right? And so they're going to be looking at this I always tell people, especially folks around where I live, like there's so much irrigated agriculture, and all of it is 62% of all the water in the arid West that's available for irrigation or use originates on federal public land. And the reason for that is that 1891, when President Harrison signed the first Forest Reserve, they realized that if you did something denuded, you cut all the timber, you put too many sheep, you owned these lands, that you would control the water, you would ruin the water or control it. And so if you don't think that global investors are looking at water in the West right now, I ain't tinfoil hatting. I'm just saying I'm a terrible businessman, and if I can see that if I owned Gibson Reservoir up west of my house, I could control 93,000 irrigated acres over there.
Well, something that makes me super happy in that entire equation is the undoubted conversation that was had between the seller and the purchaser of that ranch, that Brad and Phil and all them guys caught up on. That guy is a pharmaceutical executive worth tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. And he went out to Wyoming and bought 20,000 acres. And some joker out there said, you know what the reality of this situation is, though? When you buy 20, you get another 20 for free.
Yep.
Because now you control it. So it's a joke on society. It's a joke on all of us that actually own that land, that some, executive who's made all of his money profiting off other people's pain probably, then was able to stand there and sneer and laugh and joke at our expense over the fact that he just locked up 20,000 acres of our land. And then a couple good old boys crawl out of the woods of Missouri and end up out there in Wyoming, make a mistake, according to the sheriff who arrested them, because some asshole ranch hand is on video saying, "Don't you know who I work for? Don't you know how rich he is?"
Right.
And then they call the sheriff does the bidding, and they end up in court. And for the first time, we ended up winning. And now that executive's trying to get it before the Supreme Court. So just watching a baby have its toy taken away, like watching a bully be put in the corner, man, that makes me happy.
Me too. And there's two things there that also, one that has been brought out by the corner crossing thing, which is the reality of the checkerboard, which is such a complicated thing for people back east to try to grasp, right? Where every other section is public and every other section is private. And of course, without being a lecturer here, that's a result of the railroad days, when the federal government needed the railroads to go out west and make a line, right, to Seattle, to California. And so they gave them, that was the incentive for the railroad barons to do this work. They gave them every other section of the American land. And I think that's really hard for people back east to grasp. It would have been for me in Alabama 40 years ago, But that's an interesting problem that people are now aware of, right? That we have this checkerboarded public land in the West. One day, I hope that we're going to be able to settle this public lands question, where we agree that the American public lands are one of the best things we've ever done. And we're going to work on settling that trade in those sections and consolidating America's public land. I think we can do that someday, but first we have to we have to marginalize the people who are trying to take it away.
And we also have to recruit the people who've never laid eyes on it.
Right.
We have to speak to their heart. I'm actually going to be the keynote speaker at the Indiana BHA conference or get together. And I'm going to speak about growing up in Northwest Indiana and how demonized public land was. Like, public land was the equivalent of the bread line. That's
Wow.
only where you went when you were starving and you had nowhere else to go. And we would drive down this highway on opening weekend, and there'd be an orange vest every 100 yards along this fence separating a state park and a fish and wildlife area.
Yeah.
And you just thought, them poor bastards
Right.
standing there in the bread line while I'm off to my private property. Look at me.
Right.
And then I end up in Montana, and I'm like, wait a minute. This is what public land really is? You mean I can walk further than I can see without any worry about stepping foot on a piece of property that doesn't belong to me
Right.
and my 330 million fellow Americans? You know, like, how amazing is that?
Walk for a
And
month.
just the idea that you may not ever own 40 acres, but that's cool because you already own, you know,
Yeah.
a couple 640 million. You know the
Right.
number. What's the
Yeah.
number?
640 million. But I mean, that's everything in together. It's like 23% of America's surface, and it's a 23% that wasn't claimed by the railroads or the homesteaders or the you couldn't do anything with it. That's why it's left over.
So I
Back
think
in the
guys
day.
back there in Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, these places that are so devoid of public lands,
Right.
Texas, they hear Hal Herring talk. They hear the rest of us chatter, and it just seems too good to be true. Like, if you've never been out there, it just seems baffling to somebody from Crown Point, Indiana, where I grew up hunting. And if you had 5 acres of woods, man, you had a gold mine.
Right.
But tell someone, no, seriously, you just point your truck west, and when you hit this border, you do whatever you want to do within the confines of common sense and law.
Right.
But you can camp there, you can shoot there, you can hunt there, you can fish there, you can hike there, you can shed hunt there, you can forage there. Like, it's yours. And you don't have to check in, you don't have to sign a waiver. There's no gatehouse at the state park. You just go.
Right.
And it really is that simple. It's yours. And if you're not taking advantage of it now, you should start.
I would go one better too, not better, but one different. I was in the Apalachicola National Forest, North Florida. It's the same thing, man. I went to this thing called Bradwell Bay Wilderness. It's like this swamp wilderness. But on my way there, you could just pull over. Oh, it was like winter, man. It was like 20 below zero at my house in Montana, And I was down there doing some research, and I'm just pulling over in the truck and kicking back on the white sand, watching these gators surface and kind of sun because it wasn't that hot, right? It was cool. And I did that for days without going to town, and I didn't even see anybody. It was just freedom, man. And you drift down these sand roads, and it goes into this thing called Tate's Hill State Forest, which all of this was abandoned after it was clear cut over so hard that nobody wanted it. Back in like 1900, 1880s, nobody knew what to do with it. All the timber had been removed. They tried to drain it, didn't work. You know what I'm saying? It was just wrecked. And so the federal government ended up with it, and it became the Apalachicola National Forest. And I had a blast. There's redbreast, like brim sunfish, in all the ditches. So you can catch and eat fish. It's almost every supper, like with a cricket and a bobber. I mean, this place is incredible, and it's right there. You go 10, 20 miles south, and you're in the Redneck Riviera with the Panama City and the what do you call that, Miracle Strip? When I was a little kid, we that's where we went, right?
I like the redneck Riviera. That's got a
That's
nice
what they
little-
used to call it. Yeah. And
Well,
then
Shags, you grew up out in Oregon with a little bit of a different, maybe a little bit of a different perspective, because your hunting ground was almost a blend between private and public. I mean, it was humongous, hundreds of thousands of acres of paper mill owned
Yeah.
property.
right.
So
Yep.
talk a little bit about how different that is, and
Well-
how you're very familiar with it, and I've hunted it.
You bet.
Yeah, when growing up, it was sweet because I mean, Weyerhaeuser and a lot of these paper mills and logging companies would have hundreds and thousands of acres of land, but I believe they were getting some type of cut or kickback or some type of tax exempt status to open it up for hunting. Like they could keep gates closed and you had to walk in, which we loved, especially being younger. Like we'd park at a gate and you'd walk 2 miles back and probably wouldn't see anybody or anything. And there was some public lands up on the hill, but for the most part, we were all on like Weyerhaeuser property or Evenson, that type of thing. But nowadays, you have to pay. Like they got greedy. It wasn't what they were getting before from the government wasn't enough, and now these big companies want you to have to draw. You pay to get in, and then if they draw your name, then you get to pay to get a key to a gate, or you get permission to hunt a section of that. So it's kind of morphed into capitalism and greed of it just wasn't enough to let us on there beforehand. Then they realized, well, we can start double dipping now. And Brandon, you know that we got to hunt on a very small, I say small, it was still pretty large, but a small section of public land where all the poor saps that didn't get the draw all have to now congregate, and everyone's forced into one little section while the haves get to go into whatever gate they have the key for. And yeah, I would be very frustrated because even talking to my friends and family that are back there, like you have to be on the computer, multiple devices, just ready because it sells out instantly. And you just have to sit there and wait and hope that you click the button fast enough at the top of the hour to get in and get your name drawn. So yeah, I grew up very blessed, and I'm kind of glad now I don't live out there because it sounds like a huge headache. And yeah, it's like you said, it's a slippery slope, and it's terrifying that there's people that just go, well, whatever. And another thing I find very strange is a lot of people, even out here, I hear them talking about of like, well, the government can't run it. They don't do a good job running it. Leave it up to the states, or it'd be better off in private hands. A lot of libertarians like to say like too much government, they own too much. No, let private business own it and they'll run it better. And I disagree with that 100%. How kind of like we were talking, like, yeah, Monsanto or Bayer now is going to do a really good job with that water up there because, you know, they didn't create the Agent Orange or all the chemicals that are giving us cancer now that we spray in our yard. And I'm sure that wouldn't get in any drinking water whatsoever.
Because when they look at budgeting, the budgeting cycle, they're like, you know, if we just cut a little bit here, we cut a little bit there, and all of a sudden it's like, yeah, maybe we cut a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so,
well, and now I'm curious to get your opinion on this, Hal, because I know them trying to sell the lands in Utah kind of fell flat and stopped, but now it sounds like they're trying to sneak it into the big beautiful bill, which already would be a disaster for public lands that no one's talking about because everyone's talking about the deficit and how much money it's going to cost us and this and that. But if you start breaking it down, if you're a conservationist and like the outdoors, I hope you enjoy seeing like oil rigs in Yellowstone, because this big beautiful bill is a dangerous thing for the outdoors.
It is. What the big beautiful bill is, though, is it's a wake up call to the American people who, dude, all my life I've been right. I think I wrote my first piece at Field and Stream in 1999, you know, and it was about game farming, and then the next one was like public land. Literally, I think 2000, I wrote a story called "No Place Whatsoever," the efforts to privatize America's public lands in Field and Stream, and this has been going on forever. And all the people I know who love to hunt and pack mules and stuff in elk hunt, they're like, "It'll never happen. I hate the federal government. Forest Service, I don't like them either. Bureau of Land Management, I hate that. And I'm like going, dude, watch out. Like, what's, what's going to happen here. They're going to, and then every year the budgets for management got smaller, right? While more and more people were going to the public land. So, and then the people who were strangling the budgets were going like, yeah, see, they can't do anything right. It's like taking away your money for fixing your trails, and then pointing out that the trails aren't fixed, and go like, see, they can't do nothing right. And then you know what the next thing they say is, maybe my friend should buy it. He's got a lot of money in the tech business, and he really loves that. He'll make it better, right? You'll never get to go there.
Yeah, it'll look nice from outside the fence.
Yeah, and it's there's a lot to talk about in this. It's been going on forever. I love to tell this story about in 1891, President Benjamin Harrison signed the first Forest Reserve into law. That was the Forest Reserve Act. And it was the Yellowstone Timber Reserve, because they were cutting so much timber they were afraid that the homesteaders weren't going to have enough like lodgepole to build a corral down in Wyoming, right? And so they were like, we got to do something. And so they set aside this, and it was called the Yellowstone Timber Reserve. And it became the Shoshone National Forest, first national forest in America. And it was like, it's so incredible now, like with elk and grizzly bears and bighorn sheep and all that stuff. It became like the great refuge for wildlife during the years when we were wiping it out, right? So anyway, it was 1893. And I'm going to say it, the railroads were speculating, and all the dudes with the top hats and the cigars, right? And they caused the Panic of 1893. Brandon, you ever heard of this?
No.
Okay, so they wrecked the economy, kind of like 2008. And the first thing that the Wyoming legislature did, they met and they said, holy smokes, the economy's in free fall. What we need to do is repeal that forest reserve and get back to looting the timber and market hunting the game and stealing the land. And that'll fix it. And luckily, the federal government held out, and they were not able to repeal the Yellowstone Timber Reserve, which would have been the end of the national forest, right? That was the first one.
Wow.
So it took less than 2 years for a state legislature to try to attack the concept of federally managed public lands for the American people.
Man.
You know.
Well, I mean, so it's a common theme that there's always been enemies of conservation.
No doubt.
I think what's so scary right now is there's new constituencies and new collaborations being formed. And one that's blowing my mind, Hal, I've all but written an article in my mind about how antlers are going to be the end of hunting. And, you know, I want to say something along the lines of like, look, if you're a PETA member or worse, HSUS,
yeah,
you might as well hold on to your powder, grab a seat on the couch and pop a bag of popcorn and just watch, because we're going to destroy it for you. Like, your work is done. Like, hunters can't agree on anything.
Right.
Science certainly isn't ruling the day anymore. So here in Missouri, it's chronic wasting disease. When you came, it was captive deer.
Right.
So
the two are
captive deer is not the only, but a huge contributor to the national spread of chronic wasting disease. And if people said, well, how can that be? Well, because it did originate there in Fort Collins and that, Colorado State University laboratory, when they took a scrapies infected sheep pen and put mule deer in it, and they got into the wild, and it was spreading slowly through the wild, but eventually it got into the captive industry. And you take a breeder buck to one facility, you let him do his job, you put him back in the trailer, you take him to the next facility, let him do his job. Now, if you follow that buck from point to point to point, and then you overlay the next one that tested positive from point to point to point, then you overlay the next one, then the next one, then you can see this graph of where all these CWD positive deer were transported in a trailer, spread the disease, and then the disease spread from inside the facility into the wild through, connectivity in and outside of the fence.
Right.
So that's how it happened. We're also guilty as hunters because we moved carcasses from CWD positive areas, and birds can carry it, and it can be taken up in grasses. So that, it's a MFer of a disease. It's not a bacteria. It's not a virus. It's a misfolded prion. It's a protein. That confuses people. So now you got the constituency of the people that'll put a knife in conservation for no matter what. Whatever horse is riding them into that battle, they're getting on it because they hate everything that we stand for. Those people exist. All right, we'll deal with them. Then you got, the captive industry who's been after the public deer hunter for as long as they could, because why are they doing for free what they could pay me to do?
No doubt. Right.
And then all of a sudden you've got this new incredibly powerful constituency in the Sitka wearing, raven crossbow shooting, redneck blind sitting, big buck only mega hunter who bought land for no purpose other than killing one giant buck per year.
Right.
And now every deer that the Department of Conservation culls was likely carrying a Boone and Crockett that was going to end up on his wall. Because he sure shit ain't shooting does, and he's not shooting smaller bucks because he's been monitoring the herd with these technologically advanced cameras that then allow us to pick and choose which deer we kill after we name them and watch them grow for 5 fucking years.
And get all their sheds every single year.
So the science tells us we got to harvest 25% of the herd each year just to maintain a healthy balance. In Missouri, we got 1.5 million deer, so we would have to kill 375,000. We kill 275,000. So the herd number continues to increase, and you've got these people saying MDC slaughtering all the deer. Hunters killed 275,000. MDC called 4,000.
Right.
Over the same period of time, MDC, like a 10-year period of time, MDC has culled 0.7% of the number of deer that hunters have killed. But they're losing their goddamn minds over it. They've got the pitchforks and the torches out, and they're going to take MDC down for all we the people, because they're culling around, CWD positive spots. All the while, we don't have a single county with more than 1% prevalence. And they're begging us to do what Wisconsin is doing, where Doug Dern is going to come down to this seminar Shags and I are hosting. It's going to be the director of the Department of Conservation, Jason Sumners, who is one of the foremost deer authorities in the country, and Dr. Grant Woods and Doug Dern. So they're all going to speak, and then I'm going to moderate that panel. And Doug Dern's going to tell you that 50% of the bucks killed in his county are now CWD positive. And then half the people are going to say, well, I don't give a shit. I'll eat it anyways. And I'll say, cut the meat closest to the bone. Cut the meat closest to the bone. So it's crazy, man. It's like the department is being crucified for being successful at keeping the disease at bay better than any other state out there.
Right.
And
That's
we don't kill
wild.
enough deer here.
Right.
So I hope, and to top that off, to shut some of them up, MDC is going to go ahead and raise prices on tags by almost double in some instances. So that's really going to help with the harvest.
Right.
And, I think we should earn a buck. You got to kill a buck before you can kill, or got to kill a doe before you can kill a buck.
Right. Is that Wisconsin's deal?
Oh, Wisconsin threw up their hands because James Kroll, who has, worked for the high fence industry his entire life, man, I listened to a podcast. He became the deer czar. So they brought up a Texas high fence guy who, let's give him credit. I mean, he's a whitetail expert. He's killed giant bucks. I listened to a podcast that he did the other day where I actually listened to it in the spirit of Bill Maher and Donald Trump sitting down together. I was like, if they can do it, I can do it. And I was like, I'm going to give this guy a chance. And he said things that I found myself in complete agreement with. Like, he said the worst thing to ever happen to the white-tailed deer is the number 170. As soon as we put a score and a benchmark to deer, it ruined the concept of deer hunting.
Right.
Then it became deer growing, deer showing, deer whatever.
Yeah.
But and he said we're to blame for that. Like him and Gordon Whittington and Stan Potts and those guys that started North American Whitetail Magazine. Like he's like, we created this monster, and he called it a monster, and he's right. But he also said that, well, I can't say he said it all, but the discussion on the podcast was maybe the best thing we can do for deer now is to kill all the wild deer and then open the gates on the high fenced facilities and let these genetically CWD resistant deer that we've grown out onto the landscape to take over. So first of all, those are the same guys that are buying the boner pills from the back of a Playboy in 1988. And to think that the captive cervid industry has created a CWD resistant deer that we can now all buy from them, kill all the wild deer and spread them out onto the landscape. That's the message coming out of that industry.
So,
and you know what the big antler guys are saying? Well, those are bigger antlers.
right. Not to mention CWD resistant, which I'm not sure how you would test that, right? What do you do? Like, you'd shoot some CWD at them and then kill them and take their brain out and go like, aha, this one must have been resistant because it ain't here.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I went back in the game farm battle in Montana, 99. This guy, a noted wacko, had a deer elk farm, and he had a big old sign on there that said, all animals here CWD tested negative. And of course, you can't test one unless you take his brain out, right?
Or lymph nodes out of its
Or lymph
neck.
nodes, right?
You can't test it till it's dead.
Yeah. So the paper put a big picture of that, like up in the paper, as to showing that all of us in that argument were not in good faith. Let's put it that way, right?
Yeah.
We must love the sinner and hate the sin.
We can find a way to make money off anything. Like that's
We can. It's so sad for me. Like I mean, you've known me for a long time. When my kids are home, we take probably at least six whitetails a year. That's our main thing, main freezer meat, right? And then we go elk hunting once the pressure's off. So we don't really hunt. We'll hunt big mule deer if we can find some sometime, but mostly what we do is shoot whitetails for meat, take the pressure off so we can go elk hunting with our low percentage lives, low percentage success in the elk,
Yeah.
Because I don't hunt much private. I'll take whitetails on private land, but I don't hunt. I hunt mostly public, for bulls, and so we don't kill one every year by any means. Mm-hmm. So those whitetails are they're our main thing. I love them. I love them for that.
Well, you need to come out here and get one from Missouri. There's plenty of them. We'd love to have you.
Yeah.
So we need to.
I'm
in a new house again, so yeah. Every time you come see me, I'll just live somewhere different. But you'll like this one. I got 40 acres in ag country in North Missouri and built a 3-acre lake. Shags put a show on the other day catching bass out of there. You'll appreciate this. I followed the standard stocking guidelines for the first year, where you put in your forage fish, and
Yep.
so I put in like 1,000 little bluegills. I put in 500 red ear. I grew up on Lake Michigan fishing yellow perch, and no one does down here. So I put in 500 yellow perch. I caught one on a spinnerbait the other day, a full-size bass spinnerbait, and I accidentally killed one, so I had to fillet it. I filleted one perch. So we let that go for about a year, and then we caught a largemouth, like a 7-pounder out of a local pond.
Yeah.
And we put it in the pond, and that kind of opened the floodgates. So we went ahead and skipped the whole putting in 6-inch bass. So I put in 150 bluegill over about 9 inches, 120 crappie over, say, 10 inches. We got a little over 100 bass in there. Most of them started over 2 pounds.
Wow.
4 of them started over 6 pounds. So we got one that we've seen at the dock we think's pushing 10 pounds. So did all that in about 18 months on a new lake.
Nice.
Shags caught 4 and 5 casts off a brush pile on a Ned rig that all of them were rod benders.
Wow.
It was a lot of fun.
What's a Ned rig?
Oh, it's just using a jig head with just like a half a worm.
Gotcha. A short.
And it's all in
plastic
a
worm.
county, Hal.
Yeah.
All in a county that has 8,000 people and no stoplights.
Nice.
So when the encroachment gets too tight on you, you could retreat back east a little bit, and
Right.
there's room for you here.
Okay, cool. Well, I love northern Missouri. We went to, what was it, Union? Was it Unionville?
Yeah, where Rudy's place was.
Yeah. That part of the country. Oh, remember, I come away from there and I remember, I grew up in Alabama and I was like, no wonder they battled it out. Like, it's like the most blood-soaked ground in America outside of southern Ohio with the Native American wars. But like, and when I left there with y'all, I was looking around and I was like, no wonder they fought it out so hard here. It's like, it's almost perfect. Like where I come from is like red clay and limestone, in Alabama. It's pretty hard to make it, really.
Yeah.
Where y'all were was like, that was you could live high on the hog there, man.
Yeah, this northern part of Missouri is unappreciated. I mean, the Ozarks are beautiful. The rivers down there,
Whew.
they're in our soul. They call,
They're hard to beat.
But these rolling river hills in this Missouri River Valley, it's beautiful. I mean, it's not great ecologically for farming, even though we do it because you got a terrace. We're implementing the old 3,000-year-old Aztec way of leveling off hillsides.
Right.
You'd think we'd have come up with something better by now, like prairie strips. But
right.
that being said,
Right.
like if you like hills, that some of them have been flattened as stairs on the way down. But it really is a beautiful, underappreciated part of the world. And 100-pound blue catfish swimming in the river. And speaking of rivers, I saw you had a haul the other day. Where were you fishing?
Maine, Missouri. Yeah. It's the same one, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, we've got kind of a renaissance going on. Like, I don't know, how many thousands of miles away am I from you? Would it be 2,200?
I have no idea. It'd be cool if it was just river instead of all them damn reservoirs.
I know, man, no doubt. And I've been working under the dams, because everything congregates there because it all wants to go upstream.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And we have like a good pike fishery right now. And then the cats were going crazy. I don't know. It must have been a water temperature thing. It was right on. We don't have blues. We just have channels, but they get. I was culling them a little bit. The bigger ones I put back, but getting 2 and 3 pounders.
Well, Don Thomas and those guys and his crew, they catch the hell out of walleye out of the Missouri.
We do too. It's a water temperature thing, though. When they turn on, they're there. Mm-hmm. But you throw like a white, swim bait, and you'll either get a smallmouth or a walleye. But it's the walleye seem very water temperature specific.
Yeah.
They're there though, buddy. Don and them they were big cat fishermen too. He had a hole where the Poplar River went into the Yellowstone back a long time ago when he was young. And they would go down there and just they would take all the catfish for their food, And that's kind of cool that people don't associate the Yellowstone River with that kind of fishing.
Oh, you'll appreciate this. This was another night that I can blame on Miller Lite, but I was at a professional bowhunter society banquet, and those that don't know, Don Thomas is who I credit for really giving me the confidence to get started as an outdoor rider when I was living out there as well. And when he came as the keynote speaker to the Springfield conference for the PBS, and we did a podcast, so it's on Driftwood Outdoors if anybody's interested. He put his bow in the auction, and he used this bow in Australia to kill an Asiatic
Yeah.
water buffalo. So to go a little further back, when I was living out there as well, he introduced me to Dick Robertson. So I have a Robertson made for me. At the time, I was younger and cockier, and he said, "How heavy do you want this bow to be?" I said, 70 pounds.
Ow.
He said, "No, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing it." So I think it ended up being 64, which is still way too much. But this bow is 72 pounds, a Dick Robertson handcrafted bow. And I thought, well, shit, who's going to bid on a 72-pound bow? I can probably get this thing for $400 or $500. And I think I got it for $1,600. And man, there was a whole crowd of people cheering, and I was deep and I was into it. So now the goal is to take Don's bow to Australia myself and kill an Asiatic water buffalo with it, just like he did.
Yeah, well, his Australia stories are some of my favorites of his, just because it's so exotic. That is cool, man. So Tell me, so that's a Dick Robertson recurve?
It is, yep. And
wow,
mine's hanging up there too.
So I was gonna, I had to Google up to make sure I was gonna get this right, but anybody listening to this to read Don Thomas's book, How Sportsmen Saved the World.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of a essential text for me. And yes, there it is.
Yep.
And he manages to, in his way, he manages to boil it down there, where you could, I would say it was highly accessible history, and buddy, that's a hard thing to do if you're writing, if you've ever tried to write any history and make it compelling.
So these are all Don's books.
God.
That's the Don Thomas collection. I don't think I have them all, but
yeah.
wow.
If you're just listening, Brandon's holding, what is that? 8, 9, maybe 10 books in his arms.
12.
12,
Yeah.
like an accordion.
Yeah. Well, he's got some good stuff, and he's an incredible shotgun and dog man.
Well, what I'm growing to appreciate more and more every day in a guy like Don, even more so than you, like you're definitely of the same cloth, but you're still producing a lot of content and you're a recognized name. Don's a genius, and he goes pretty unrecognized. He doesn't do much as far as regular content production.
Right.
Outside of traditional Bowhunter magazine. One of the biggest screw jobs ever, what happened to him at Ducks Unlimited.
Well,
But
he's a hero too in that. Like
he is. That's the thing. Like
he wrote our stream access piece,
Yeah.
despite he couldn't care, and also he's a physician who is one of the most beloved people in that Lewistown, Montana,
Oh, yeah.
right? And in Fergus County, he's delivered the babies and saved the legs and set the arms, right? And
Yep.
and fixed the skull fractures. I mean, the guy's like, he's hard to attack, right? But they were managed to get rid of him because he defended our stream access law. I mean, that was just I couldn't believe that.
a conservation organization
Yeah.
and they did it
like-
because the guy who built the house on the Ruby and wanted to privatize our river is a big donor.
Right.
So no, Don's definitely one of my heroes. He
Me
doesn't
too.
give a shit about the corporate side of hunting at all. He chases grizzly bears in Russia with a stick and a string. And
Yep.
one of the most interesting things about that guy is his dad won the Nobel Prize
Yeah.
for inventing bone marrow transplants.
Right.
So Don basically had to be a doctor to be the third in the line.
Yeah.
So he got a float plane and started doing house calls in Alaska.
Yep.
So yeah,
Yeah.
he's pretty amazing. So
Pretty amazing. I value that connection so much.
Yeah.
I've just learned so much, and it's all again, it's also very understated, just like the books. There ain't nobody yelling about like killing the biggest water buffalo in Australia.
Dude, what gets me now is when I will turn my back on you and walk away if you try to tell me what your turkey scored. Like you can't take that from. You can't ruin. It's a. Does it have a beard? or does it have spurs? That's all I want to know. Is it a gobbler? Is it a jake? Is it a hen?
Right
Like, if you start scoring turkeys, I'll quit. Like, I'm just done.
I've got to tell you, I don't know how to score a turkey.
I don't either.
I didn't know
that's
that.
something to do with spurs, beard.
Yeah.
Thank God we don't know.
Dude, there's an old Calvin and Hobbes thing where Calvin tells Hobbes, he said, I can't remember what they're talking about, some kind of sport, but he goes, if you put numbers on it, it makes it a lot better. And Hobbes goes, really? I don't see how that works.
Well, man, we're running out of time. Shags has a bedtime. I got a lot of things to do because I am T-minus 11 hours leaving for the Boundary Waters, my first trip up there. So that kind of allows me to do two things at once. I want to ask you about BHA, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. There's been a big transition there in the last couple of years. I want to know your take on how that's all shaken out and what the path forward looks like. Part of which includes helping to fight for the Boundary Waters.
You bet.
So I want to know what you know about that area. Have you been there? And talk a little bit about the perceived threat to the Boundary Waters in this big, beautiful bill.
So what we're doing at the Big Beautiful Bill, and, you know, let me be clear at this, is what will happen with the Big Beautiful Bill or anything else is what we the people allow to happen. You can't just write no Big Beautiful Bill and go in there and have some foreign company start digging up the edge of the Boundary Waters. That's not going to happen. We have laws, we have courts, we have judges, we have the American people, right? So as long as people stand, then we can navigate this. But so there is a mining threat on the edge of the Boundary Waters wilderness. There's anybody read Sigurd Olson, right? You know, and read the history of the Boundary Waters, how we got it, why it's there. It was in pretty hard fought battle. One of the first wildernesses, the only canoe wilderness in the United States, almost in the world. You go to across Quetico, but I've only been there once, Brandon, and we filmed part of the movie Public Trust there about public lands, and we didn't have a permit to go into the wilderness part. So we did like a 3-day trip on the edges of the main wilderness. And it was still life-changing. I caught a big-ass smallmouth out of these lily pads. I was catching mostly hammer handles, but I was catching pike on every portage. I mean, people got pretty sick of me fishing. And then they were telling me about these lake trout. And then we brought in some leeches. And this is where I learned the slip bobber system, which Wisconsin people, all these people, they did, Michiganders, they all know the slip bobber system. I'd never seen that, right? And so they taught me the slip bobber system, and we caught these walleye enough to like sustain ourselves.
Yeah.
At 18 feet. They weren't at 19, and they weren't at 20, and they weren't at 15. They were at 18 feet. We were drifting out of a canoe. And Lucas Leaf was the chef, and Spencer Shaver, who was sportsman for the Boundary Waters Conservation Group at the time, they showed me how to do this, and buddy, it worked, right? We had fish. And Lucas Leaf is one of the great wild game chefs of the United States, so we ate like kings. But you're in for a treat. I mean, there's nothing like it. We're going to hold on to it. We're not going to let a foreign mining company take away the copper and our stuff and wreck the place. We're just not going to do that. And so, I mean, I just, there's a little bit of me who's like going, it's time we ask ourselves these questions. What do you stand for? Are you, and also, what will you stand against? Will you let a foreign company come here knowing that the mining law of 1872, which was written for a guy with a burro and a pickaxe, is still on the books, that will give away our natural resources to whoever takes them? The mining law of 1872 is a joke. Like, if we were going to make America great again, that's the first thing we would rewrite and reform. And the fact that we're not means that the people haven't spoken the way we should.
Well,
So-
I worry too, because I mean, I follow Field and Stream on all the social medias, and I saw that article about what you're talking about, and one of the commenters was like, "Oh, great, another propaganda piece from
Yep.
Field and Stream." Like, you guys are like literally being called woke in some
Yep.
comments because you're standing up for conservation. Suddenly now, loving the outdoors and not wanting people to drill it or mine it is suddenly we're woke and
Well, yeah,
speaking propaganda.
that's the crazy part is, how many guns do we own collectively between us? How many animals do we kill each year? How long have you been kind of at one with the land?
Right.
And now somehow, like, people are going to watch this podcast and be like, just three liberals.
Yeah,
Yeah.
more propaganda.
More propaganda, but well, there's
wait a
two
minute,
things
like,
there.
How did that happen? Like, how did the
It
gun
happened.
guys
It happened. So I can tell you how it happened. So 1970, the environmental decade of the 1970s. That was the Clean Water Act, 1972. Clean Air Act, 72. Richard Nixon signed them in, right? The Toxic Substances Control Act of 1976, right? I mean, it was terrible. Those things were made to create to fix terrible problems that we had. And so things got better and better and better for us, all of us. I'm older than you, but all my life it's been getting better. And the people who were offended by the Clean Water Act and the Toxic Substances Control Act, they have set a propaganda campaign that started. And if you go back to the founding of the Heritage Foundation, which everybody knows about now because of Project 2025, right? Which I think is a good thing, right? I think we should know about this. Back 25 years ago, nobody knew who they were. They're one of the biggest buildings in D.C. Like, it's huge. And so these guys have been fighting against American conservation because it makes them pay the costs of their production, right? They were offended by the Clean Water Act. I think people don't even remember how people are going, you mean I can't pour this poison in the water? I got to haul it off? You out your mind. Right? and people were offended by that. And so there has been a propaganda campaign. If you look at these so-called think tanks, they started right after the 70s. We created the federal laws that cleaned up the water and the air and kept some of the toxic substances out of our food, right? And our ground. So they have built this, and the people who are now responding to this, I wouldn't say they're victims. They have solely absorbed this anti-conservation, anti-environment conservation. And it's really it's a very American thing because it's freedom of speech, and the First Amendment allows people to say things that aren't true. And I value that. You just counter that with the truth, right? But some people don't, they don't want to hear that. They go, the Clean Water Act is a classic example of federal overreach. And they go, every time I swim, I want to swim right through some toxic substances and drink sewage.
Like the old George Carlin skit about the Hudson.
Yeah, what was it?
Well, just that they're immune to everything because they grew up swimming in toxic waste.
Right. Or like those guys in Lagos, Nigeria, who live in those shanty towns in the water. Right? Have you ever seen those pictures?
You got me there, man. You outkicked my coverage when you start talking about things in Nigeria.
Well, that's
I'm trying to keep up with you in America, Hal.
But it's like, I mean, that's what it would look like, right? If these people had their way here.
Well, I'm from Lake County, Indiana, which is Gary, Indiana, Hammond, Indiana.
Yeah.
I mean, you want to talk about one of the most devastated ecological parts of the country, like what we did to the lakeshore. Oh, yeah, I wanted to talk to you about that, too. Shags may have to just stay up a little bit longer. Your whole expose on the Kankakee Marsh and what you did with those guys there. But that's
awesome.
all part of it. Like, the steel mills came in on the south shore of Lake Michigan in the county I grew up in. The only reason I grew up there is because people migrated from Kentucky, Tennessee, Illinois, Michigan, wherever, to come to that hotbed of economic stimulus. And then they just dumped all the toxins in the river and lit it on fire.
Right.
So, like, I literally grew up in one of those counties where the rivers burned.
Yep. And I grew up on the Tennessee. And by the time the Tennessee River, like by the time I was 12, I guess I could go by myself. It was getting better. It was getting so much better. And I honestly think that people in Alabama who are obsessed with Guntersville Lake, right, one of the great bass fisheries of our time, I don't think I'm going, please look at the history, right?
Put two and two together, fellas.
Yes.
Put two and two together.
And let's build a future. Like, let's create a working federal government, a working state government, a working county government. You know, let's create it, because if you're anti-government, that's like being anti-weather, man. People are going to have a government.
Yeah. Oh, I had an interesting day in the Capitol yesterday. Ran into a guy that came into the governor. I was in the governor's office talking to his secretary and chief of staff. This guy shows up. I see the secretary go for the security button. Watched her press it. And next thing I know, there's two Capitol policemen walking past the door, back past the door. I actually was talking a little bit about the podcast. So the chief of staff left. Mary's like, Brandon, don't leave. Don't leave, please. And I was like, I won't leave you, Mary. I'll stay right here, you know. Definitely didn't have my back to him anymore. And he was a big guy. I mean, not quite Shag's big, but he was probably, you know, he was a big fella. And Adam, the chief of staff, had to be like, you know, remember the last conversation we had? So he was a known offender of kind of just being a little off his rocker, you know. So it was a little scary. And then he had heard me talking about the podcast, and I walked out of the office, and the next thing you know, he's coming after me fast. And I'm like, oh shit, like what's going? And then he grabs my hand. And then the next thing I know, I'm talking to him, and he starts asking me about, you know, if I know Jesus, and I start talking to him about that, and then, you know, telling him, yeah, I do, you know, and it's been more recent. And he was intrigued, but then he starts telling me, well, then tell me this, why aren't you standing for the return of our state to we the people? And I'm like, well, what kind of government are you proposing? And he's like, no government. We follow God. And I was like, well, man, that's great, and I appreciate that, but God's not going to pave the streets. Like, what are you going to do about that? Like, and I started asking, he's like, well, that's, you know, but I talked, and next thing you know, now the governor's Secret Service is rolling up to protect me from this guy. So I got two plain, like, in suits state troopers that are on the governor's detail standing 6 feet away watching this conversation go down. And he ended up shaking my hand and walking off and left the whole situation. But it was interesting because he was there to sit in the governor's office. When they asked him to leave, he's like, this is my house. I have the right to be here. It's we the people. But you got a 60-something-year-old lady scared to death.
Right.
And it's just like living in fear of those kind of people. And thankfully it ended peacefully, but he made it very apparent that, like, the reckoning is coming.
Right.
And I was like, well, what in the hell does that mean, man? Like, are you, like, what are you trying to say here? Like,
yeah. I just noticed that they never have a revelation to do anything they don't already want to do.
yeah.
Like I've really spent a lot of time looking at this with those folks, and like you said, remember that joke from that movie Happiness, where the God tries to save the guy drowning, the boat comes, tries to save the guy drowning.
Oh, I sent you a boat.
Yeah. And he goes, I sent you 3 boats. When the guy gets up to heaven.
Yeah. Well, man, we do need to wrap it up pretty quick. But the two things, tell me just quickly about, because I was the one that introduced you to that Kankakee Marsh story.
Yeah.
And you took it to an awesome level. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I found those guys who grew up there, and they were like real non-technological. Like, it took a long time to get all that set up, right? And they just told stories, man. It was like, you know, it was just listening to people who loved something. That's really all that was.
Yeah.
It was finding somebody who knows something, and then finding out that you listen to people who really love something. And that kind
What'd you learn about What'd you learn about the area?
What we lost.
500,000 acre marsh off the
Yeah.
southern tip of the Great Lakes.
Yeah, that crept slowly through, like almost like the Everglades, right?
Right. It was the Everglades of the North.
It was the Everglades of the North, and then just the total wealth that was there, and the Native Americans had used that forever, and they didn't live in it, right? They would come there, harvest, do all their stuff, and I've recently learned that was a real Native American strategy. Is you located the population centers pretty far away from your resource that you needed. And the Kankakee was definitely like that. And I'm sure the bugs were so bad that they didn't want to be there, like dead middle of summer.
Well, I'd have worn a head net to be there during duck season because they said 20% of all the waterfowl in North America came through there and roosted in that marsh.
Wow.
Yeah. And you know what we got for that? You know what we got for taking a 292-mile river and turning it into a 90-mile shipping ditch and draining that wetland? Some of the worst, sandy, shitty bushel per acre producing ag lands you could imagine.
Yeah.
Like God didn't intend for that land to grow corn.
Right.
And it still doesn't want to grow corn.
Right. Yeah, that
But
came
we
up.
traded one of the ecological wonders of this continent for that. And that's what they're trying to do to us today.
That's what they're trying to do and now they want us, the taxpayer, to subsidize it too and pay federal crop insurance when it fails.
Oh yeah, it's a guaranteed business.
Hey, I want to ask you before you leave. There is a restoration effort up there, and like here's. Man, we'll get together and talk about this sometime.
Well, I did a podcast with a girl named Bree who runs the Newton County Soil and Water Conservation District.
Yes.
And I filmed an episode of Prairie Prophets up there, but
gotcha.
That one didn't make it to air because Rudy said it was too much about me.
Oh man. Hell, that's what I wanted to see.
Well, I got a copy.
Okay. Yeah. But it
was great. It talked about that. We went out to that land and we talked. It was just one of those times in life where we talked about the land. We showed the restoration of the prairie. We went to Gary and showed what urban environment started the sprawl that caused the devastation, and it's a great story, man. Like, it's a great story. So.
It is one of the great American conservation stories here's the thing. I think it's waiting to happen. Because of the lack of economic vibrancy, as they say, everybody who count, like, what do you call the Economist, is a person who knows the price of everything and the value of nothing.
Well, I do have to say there's some farmers in that county that I love, like family, and they're not the ones that did it. They're just there farming it now.
That's right. But if we made the right deals, like if we made the right choices, we could have our cake and eat it too, and you could restore huge swaths of that.
Absolutely. I killed my first deer. I was 14 years old, and it was a yearling doe, and I killed it in a place called the Dunes. And it looks exactly like the sand dunes on the shore of Lake Michigan, but there isn't standing water within 30 miles.
Far out. What was it before? Was it part of the bottom of the swamp?
Yeah. Well, the tops of the dunes were little islands, little bald knobs.
Right.
Man, next time you're around, we'll go up there. I'll show you the arrowhead collection off that farm.
Yeah.
Indiana University came up there and did an ecological dig, and they let them do it if they got to keep what the landowners let them do it to catalog everything, but then they got to keep it.
Gotcha.
It's crazy.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well,
all right, give us a quick plug on BHA. The new regime has settled now and seems to be doing pretty good work.
I think everything's going well. I think Backcountry Hunters and Anglers is set to be the unifying force of this public, at least the public lands part. And then we have so many chapters across America, right, that can address local conservation issues. I think it's never been better. And
it seems to have matured out of its teenage years.
That's right. And there may be less fire and brimstone, but maybe more potential for just work getting done, like getting up at 7 a.m. and start swinging the hammer.
Right.
Kind of work. I think that's going on. I miss some of the fire and brimstone that land had, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But I think that getting up in the morning and swinging the hammer is what's happening now, and right now that's what's required. Really, we have a great BHA's got they've got a guy named Caden MacArthur in D.C. who is doing the work up there. This must be incredibly exhausting.
Yeah,
right
you know,
now,
I'll give Land some credit and say that he he yelled loud enough for people to start taking notice, and
for sure.
somebody has to be the bull in the china shop, make everybody pay attention, and then somebody else can come along. And some people are better at that than being managers. I kind of relate. I'm not as excited when things get easy.
Right, that's right.
So
Well, it's dangerous, right?
yeah,
It's
I'm not the guy.
dangerous.
I'm not the guy for steady and straight.
Right. Well, I just I'm looking this up right now, but Land is right in the thick of it right now on the public land stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So he has not been idle,
Yeah.
and I actually think he did exactly what he set out to do, right? And built a huge, vibrant, unifying organization. I'm pretty optimistic. You can probably tell. I'm a person who likes a lot of conflict. I'm very suspicious when things are going well. It's like in Paris, Texas, or whatever, where he goes, "I've never trusted happiness." I like it when it's pretty real hot or real cold, and I think people are at their best when they're being asked what it is they actually believe in and what are you willing to fight for.
Man, all I know is I'd never want to fight against you.
Nope.
I like to bring
me on your team.
I like to bring the A game.
I like it, man. Well, thank you for jumping on with us and covering this important topic. Shags and I are talking a lot about kind of the future of Driftwood, and we're closing in on episode 300. So we've been doing this a
Unreal.
little while now.
Yeah.
And I'm leaning towards like kind of what Rogan does and others do. And why do we have to wait 4 years before Hal Herring comes back on? Like, why don't we have Hal Herring on every year? Like, why don't we have half of our guests are like annual recurring guests? And
Right.
I think that's the direction that we're really looking at. So I hope you'll accept the invites when we send them.
Yeah,
Because
man.
you, man, are one of my living heroes. There's no doubt about it.
Well, it's a mutual admiration society. We've had a great time.
Yeah, we
Right?
have.
I mean, that's like and Shags too down there. Man, I go back to that. I don't know if you want to name it, but that fishing trip we made with your buddy, the guide.
Yeah, and so the guy was Billy Smith, and the
Yeah.
foursome was Clay Newcomb, Hal Herring, and me and Shags.
And
So that was a hell of a trip. And Clay brought, and this is before he joined Meat Eater, and he became as famous as he is, And the cool thing about Clay is he's still just Clay, and he's such an advocate for everything we believe in, and
yep.
just love that guy. And what a cool experience for the four of us to be there, frying crappie in Clay's bear grease,
Yeah.
and then going out on the river and catching a bunch of smallmouth. When it was pretty
Yeah.
damn cold on that trip too.
It was cold. All you could see of me is that giant black Sims jacket. I had it all cinched down,
Yeah, like pull your face mask down. Nobody
Yeah.
will believe me when I say it's Hal Herring.
But and we caught them too, buddy. It was like
Oh yeah.
we were throwing those real short, like little worms. Somebody had that buckskin, buck hair jig.
Mm-hmm.
You remember that?
Well, I don't remember exactly what we were throwing. I fished too much for that, but I do know that at the coldest, they all pool up together.
Yep.
They get into them deep holes, and when you find them, and man, Billy knows how to find them.
Yeah.
The other thing that guy is really developing now is a targeted approach to walleye, and he's catching, 10-pound plus walleye on the regular. So
Yeah.
we'll have to get you back, man.
Yeah, I was an all-time it was a big trip for me because it was totally new. It was freezing cold. I had no expectations. Right? Remember, it was spitting snow real hard.
Oh yeah.
And I was just like, I this may work or not. It'll be cool to see the river. And
Well,
then
Shags has the place
killing
down there now, and we
Yeah.
call it the Polish Embassy. And where it's at is at the headwaters of the current river. So if you come back, we'll take you on that first 8 miles that is Shags, I'm just gonna say it. It's a world-class brown trout fishery, man.
We joke
We-
that it's the river we no longer speak
Yeah,
of.
we try not to.
Right.
We've actually noticed a lot more people down there since we
Getting
started
recognized
bragging about it.
on the water.
So-
Hey, you do that podcast? Like, we got to stop talking about.
Isn't
this.
that such a double-edged sword, Hal?
Yeah,
Like our
it is.
job, our goal, our hope, our dream is that more people want to get outdoors and fish and hunt, just not in my spot.
Yeah, I love conservation until you're in my conservation. Then you need to go
Yeah.
That's
find
right. Like
conservation
we're all
Yeah.
guilty
somewhere
of
else.
it, man. We got to
Yeah.
suppress that ego and be open arms, and
Right, and it's
it ain't
hard.
the frying pan in Colorado yet. I'll tell you that.
Right. Right. Well, I did a story a long time ago, a fiction, not fiction, kind of mixed, nonfiction, creative nonfiction, about a creek I fished as a kid that I kept secret. And I just couldn't let it go, man, you know? And I came back and the county water, they channelized it to drop the floods, and then they put a water intake there off the spring that fed it. I lost the whole thing. And had I not been so secretive, other people would have realized how great it really was, you know. So it is a double-edged sword. It's a hard one to navigate.
Well, before we let you get out of here, we got the mystery bait bucket. I'm sure you remember that from the last time you were on here.
I did. I
Same-
do.
it
I'm
survived.
afraid.
It's the same bait bucket we've had this whole time. Brandon and I found it at the Midway Antique Mall. And if you're new to the podcast, welcome. This is how we like to wrap up each episode. It's a fun question submitted by you, fans of the podcast, friends, family. If you want your question asked and answered, just send it to us. You can email info@driftvoodoutdoors.com or send a message through Instagram and Facebook, Driftwood Outdoors, or just leave a comment on the YouTube, Driftwood Outdoors TV. So this one comes from Victor Hayes. He's asking, what are you slowly losing interest in? Oh,
Wow.
I know it right off the top of my head, and it's going to drive Brandon crazy once he comes back on here because I know he's still a huge fan of it.
All right. I was gonna say big bull elk because I've been a meat eater for so long, and then I tried to go back and towards bull hunting, and I found myself just wanting to take one for the freezer like days of yore. So I don't say I would pass one up.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm slowly losing interest in simply pursuing a 6x6, 7x7, 8x8.
No, that's a good one. Mine, of course, has nothing to do with outdoors. Did you hear the question, Brandon? What are you slowly losing interest in? You're on mute, but I would say live music for me. Like I got invited to a concert and I was like, you know what? That does not interest me at all. Even the last one that Savannah and I went to on the way home, I even told her, I go, I think that's my last one. I'm just not that into it anymore, and I'm too big. I don't fit in the seats. Like if it's inside, and then outside, like just sitting in the lawn, I don't have any interests. Yeah, so I would say I've lost all interest in seeing live music anymore.
Wow, man, that's hard to believe coming from you. That was your
I know.
life for a long time.
Yeah.
It was, and I think that's part of the problem too. Is I got spoiled being a radio DJ for so long. Like I got to be side of the stage, or I got to hang out with a bunch of bands I really liked and looked up to, and now I kind of feel like, well, I got to go sit out with the pores. I don't want to do that.
Man, this is a broad answer, but I'm just gonna go people. You know, doing the
Yeah, that's
doing the
another thing with the
podcast.
live music. I don't want to be out there fighting
Yeah,
the
that's
crowds
exactly
or the
it,
traffic.
man. Like I live on a remote property, and the idea of like going to town and getting in a crowd gives me anxiety. Like going to like a banquet where they're gonna yell and scream and auction. Like I'd rather just I've turned into that old guy that's like, you can keep your free ticket. I'll just send you a check. I'll pay you so I can stay home.
Yeah.
You know, like that's weird. Like I see all the memes about how you're turning into your dad and stuff, and like, dude, like it happened. I don't know. You know?
Oh, that's a good one. Baseball is another one for me. Like I used to be
yeah.
so into baseball. Like I'd
Yep.
listen to it or watch it. I'd love going to Busch Stadium. I grew up a Cardinals fan in Oregon, and now I couldn't even tell you anybody that's on the team. I used to follow it so closely.
I picked up a newspaper yesterday, and it like shocked me that I saw the standings, the AL and the NL standings, and I forgot that those were in the newspaper. Like, it's been so long since I've had a newspaper. I was like, oh shit! Like,
Right.
and then I saw the Cubs are 4 games up in the Central, and I was like, it's bizarro world, man. I forgot what happened in the time period that I forgot newspapers existed. The Cubs became a good baseball team again.
All right, final thought, final cast of the pod.
I haven't ripped this quote out in a long time, but it's appropriate again. Chris Christopherson once said, "I can't believe my heroes have become my friends." And Hal Herring definitely is in that category for me. Like, it's amazing that this guy I've looked up to for so long is my really good friend at the same time. I'm appreciative for you as an American warrior, doing everything you do for us, and I'm appreciative for you for just being Hal, my friend, too. So
Cool.
I like knowing both sides of you.
Well, thanks a lot, Brandon. Mutual, man. You
I
do,
could-
Shags.
I would definitely listen to you to read the phone book, and it would be captivating. I love hearing you speak. I love getting to hang out and visit with you. I really appreciate you jumping on here. Appreciate all the work you're doing for all of us across this great nation, trying to protect our public lands. And be sure, before we jump off here right now, like, hit any of your social medias or your podcast or whatever you want to plug, and I'll put it in the show notes as well.
Sure. It just the podcast, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers podcast and blast, is good. Right now I'm still the conservation columnist for the print magazine of Field and Stream, and I'm working on that actually right now. We're doing the edits. So if you hadn't looked at the new Field and Stream, it's like the $20 big thick book. Have y'all seen it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
It looks
it's
sharp.
it's sharp, and it's huge. Like everybody I know who's gotten a copy of it, likes to hunt and fish, has really liked it. So
How many issues a year?
it's right now it's 2. Let's see, it might be 4 because I'm doing the fall issue right now. So hopefully it's 4. They're working, man. It's a full on concern. You know, it's a going concern, man. And when I got the first one, I was like, this may be the future of print outdoor magazines. You know, where you get a whole lot for your money. And we did a wilderness issue, the first one that came out. It was a lot of fun, man. So that's my only plug. I'm still working on the public lands book, Brandon. This is my 5th year. Yeah.
Is Yvonne Chenard still floating you?
Well, not really, but they are still publishing the book.
Yeah.
So I'm working through the edits. So there is an end in sight.
Can't wait to read it, man. And you
well,
got,
me
you're
either.
still hosting the BHA podcast.
Still hosting the BHA podcast. It's pretty busy. You know, it's like I don't wake up in the morning and wonder what I'm going to be doing in an hour.
Well, dude, with everything I had going on, getting ready to go for this trip, and
Yeah.
I got 23 employees now, and a lot going on. I just couldn't sleep last night. I gave up at about 3:15, and I've been on the computer since 3:30 this morning. So I'm just so much going on, man. You can't slow the brain down. Can't.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, it's tough. And I've kind of slowed way down on my drinking too. And that was the way I slowed that down. So like I don't really have a plan B except to get utterly exhausted, right?
Other than one mistake when I thought Shags' vodka was water, alcohol hasn't touched these lips in over 2 years.
And
Wow.
that was a shock. You should have seen his face.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was horrible. Like, yeah, man, I put it down and I walked away, and no temptation to go back.
Right on. Well, I want to get back with you when you get back because we didn't talk about your Boundary Waters trip. And, dude, I could just tell you, I ran into like the 76 something late 80-year-old woman paddling this big Kevlar canoe with all her stuff, And I stopped and I talked to her I talked with her, and I said, what? She had been on this long trip. And she said, all my friends have gotten kind of old, and like each one had like an excuse. There was some reason they didn't go, so I just took off by myself. And it was a long trip. And I was thinking, I don't think there's a place in the world where when you're an older person, like pretty old, right, you can still go on a huge wilderness trip by yourself. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was, I just had this huge amount of admiration for this woman and for the place, and the American belief in public lands that made it possible, right?
Well, it's been a long time since I've been this excited. I'll tell you all about it as soon as I get back.
I can't wait, man.
Yeah, well, I can't wait to hear about it either. Well, Hal, it's always a pleasure, my man. Gear review
Same.
Coming up next. All right, Brandon, into the podcast, the beginning of a gear review. What are you reviewing for us today?
So I held up that whole group of Don Thomas books. This is the one that I first was introduced to him by. I actually met him by walking into his office as a physician in Lewistown when I was pharmaceutical repping, and I finally met a doctor I wanted to talk to because he had elk blood on his jeans and hunting books in his cabinet, and so that's Don there. And in that country that he's in, what he calls Longbow country, that's the part of eastern Montana that gets me excited. That's like the mountains where Hal lives, like that area. It's beautiful and it's postcards and there's amazing things to do there. But I'll take this. This is what sets my soul on fire. I want to walk as far as I can walk until I run out of horizon. And to show how quick time goes by, I was just a kid out in Montana after college, and he signed that book in 2005. So that's 20 years ago, and it seems like yesterday, boys and girls. That's pre-kids, and my youngest moves out in August. So that's how fast it happens.
Well, for my gear review, Brandon, I took your recommendation, and I am now on testosterone.
Oh, dude, getting jacked.
I'm gonna get jacked.
Gavin has cultivated his own army.
I got to give Game Day Men's Health a shout out because that's where I'm going. It's right here in Columbia, and they make it super easy. You set up an appointment, you go in, they give you your free evaluation, they'll draw your blood, test your testosterone, you get it back like in 20 minutes, and you sit down, you can create a game plan, and then if you're in, you want to do it, you begin your regimen. And I got my first shot today, so you guys are going to be able to watch this in real time as I just bulk up.
It's the fountain of youth, Hal. You got to try it.
I can't wait.
You can be taking shots in the butt with us.
Yeah. I might just increase my intake of elk meat and see if that works first.
Shags is willing to pay like an extra $250 so someone else will give him the shot.
Yeah,
right.
Yes, I am. I feel like if you combine all three of us, you have Joe Rogan. He's over here talking about just eating elk meat, and we're over here talking about testosterone replacement.
Right. And pretty soon we're going to be cold plunging. Yeah.
It's crossed my mind. I've been looking at some tubs.
Not me, dude. When you come this time, you'll have to hot plunge. I got the hot tub set up on the back of the deck looking out over the property.
Yeah. Nice.
So I'm a hot plunge guy, not a cold one.
Right.
All right.
All right.
We'll see you down the trail.
Man. See you down the trail.